Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your host, Big Wos, aka Wosny Lambre, joined as always by my comrade, still looking pretty tan, not just because he's a Spaniard, but because he's been on a perma vacay.
Yeah.
For how long now? Nando Vila, what's up, brother?
What's up, Waz? How's it going?
I'm good, man. I'm good. On today's show, Lionel Messi has been forced, strong-armed into staying with Barcelona. We're going to wrap that story up, tell you guys what to watch, tell you guys how you should be thinking about things this January when these conversations are going to rear their ugly heads again. So we're just going to kind of tie a bow on something that we touched on last week. Joe Biden is getting pressure from the black bourgeoisie to basically not adhere to purity tests, quote unquote, from the left about appointments and cabinet positions within a potential Biden administration, not coming from the Wall Street and financial sector. We're going to get into the ridiculousness of that. But first, because we have to, and we typically don't do President Trump is a big idiot, doofus, maniac, dangerous loon stuff on this show because there's enough of that out there, and I don't think anybody who's listening to us has any illusions about who our president is and what he's about. But you know, we're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon here, and you know, Bob Woodward's book is coming out. It's about President Trump's response to the coronavirus. And essentially, he's got President Trump on tape saying, the coronavirus is bad, it's dangerous, it's deadly, but I'm not going to go public with the information because I don't want people to panic. It looks bad on me. I'm not doing it. He essentially tells Bob Woodward on a phone call, like, I'm straight up not going to freaking tell the American people the truth because it makes me look bad and I love my precious economy. It's what I plan on running on. So I'm just going to sort of play out the string and lie to the people.
This is more deadly. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%, so this is deadly stuff.
We show cases, 99% of which are totally harmless.
Not just older.
Yeah, exactly.
Young people, to plenty of young people.
Young people are almost immune to this disease.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
We lose thousands and thousands of people a year to the flu. We don't turn the country off.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Of course, there's ethical problems with Bob Woodward's handling of this information as a journalist. He probably should have got this information out to the public as soon as possible. Instead, he sat on it so that he could sell a book about it. Bob Woodward, yes, we get it. Him and Bernstein broke Watergate. They're journalist legends and all of that stuff. But in the intervening years, man, Bob Woodward has essentially become a corporate hack. There's just no two ways about it. But this is big news. This is the president on tape saying what we all essentially knew, that he was lying to his followers and the public about the dangers of the virus, what he actually knew to be true of the virus. And he came out and sold the American people a bill of goods. As a result, millions of people got sick. Hundreds of thousands have died as a result of the virus. It's a disaster. This is the type of news that would sink in any normal time. It would sink any leader of any serious nation. It would just completely be a disaster for their campaign. I don't know that this will matter in any meaningful way as far as the election is concerned, I don't know if the Biden campaign and that team over there is smart enough to exploit this and use this for their benefit electorally. We don't know that. We just know this is big. This is a big deal, and it's horrible.
Yeah. No, like you said, Wos, in any serious society, this would be finished. Make the president resign, like in a parliamentary system, this would probably cause the fall of the government, and they would have to hold new elections for something like this, something so egregious, where the president was blatantly lying to the American people, is not only like caught lying, but caught on tape. Like it's kind of like the Ray Rice thing, like it's different when the domestic abuse is like you read about it in the newspaper or something, but when there's a video of it, like just the reaction from the public is so much worse. And, in this case, Trump can't even do like it's just he said, she said, it just reported out of context or whatever. And no, like this is like the full tape again. But the everything about this is kind of infuriating, because obviously the president lied to the American people, which probably caused people to not take the virus or at least a significant chunk of the American public not to take the virus seriously early on. I mean, this was done. Woodward did this interview on February 7th. This was before kind of shit got real with the coronavirus. So yeah, it probably would have saved lives had the president said what he said to Woodward in public. It would have saved thousands of lives, probably. That being said, also, Woodward probably should have released this when he had the goods. Like if he had a tape of the president saying, and he's been holding this for 6 months, like just to be able to sell more book copies, that's borderline. I mean, it's certainly unethical to me from a journalistic standpoint, but borderline kind of criminal even in that, Woodward could have changed the narrative dramatically around the coronavirus in those early months, right? Had, having a tape of the president saying these things, like it's a really deadly thing. It flies through the air, it maybe would have saved, even if it would have saved a few hundred lives, like it's worth it. Like think about that, So, yeah, I mean, but like you said, would it have meaningfully changed anything? I mean, that in that sense, it's like that's like a very like kind of you're black pilled at that point, like then why do anything? Like why, if nothing's going to change the narrative on anything, then it's just like the only upshot is to just like pack up and go home and just sit in your corner and not like we wouldn't even be doing this show. We wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, at some point you have to believe that these things actually could have an effect. And, just the presence of the tape. I mean, I know he got away with the pussy tape, the grab him by the pussy tape and all that stuff, but like, this is different in nature, like the grab him by the pussy tape at the end of the day is not like a policy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas this is clearly like a policy that would affect the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
And as with so many things that come out involving President Trump, part of me is like, is there anybody who actually thought this wasn't the case?
Yeah.
That he knew exactly what the threat was?
Trump is a huge germaphobe. He's a huge germaphobe. Like, there's no way, like, the first time you heard about, like, like, they're talking about, like, the threats and the thing, and, like, they can't get him to pay attention. They have to, like, sit him down for the security briefings, and it's like, oh, some tribe in the Middle East is, like, moving against, like, some militia group or whatever, and he's just, like, glazed over, doesn't give a shit. He's like, virus? What virus? There's a disease out there?
Right.
Like, wait, what? Like, right. He's a huge germaphobe. He's freaked out by this shit. It's so obvious that he was gonna be freaked out by coronavirus.
The idea that this guy didn't know all the pertinent information, especially by February, or the idea that you didn't understand that he was just basically talking shit when he comes out and says, oh, we'll be able to go to church by Easter. Like, is there anybody who really didn't think this at the time, that he was just talking out of his ass? But as as Rob pointed out to us in our little production meeting, is that, it does matter what this dude says. Like that bully pulpit of the presidency is a thing, and it does matter. It matters when the president speaks and what he says. So yes, it does matter in that sense, but like, I I can't imagine that anybody hears this tape and is genuinely surprised that Donald Trump would do this, that Donald Trump would act in only his self-interest and nobody else. Like that he would be like that he would behave this way. And of course, this comes on the heels as we switch gears with another ridiculous Trump story. Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic put out a piece about President Trump essentially, he's at Arlington Cemetery. He's visiting the graves.
It's kind of funny.
He's visiting the graves of dead American soldiers, and he's with the father of one of these dead soldiers. Everybody knows the worst thing that can happen to a parent is the loss of a child. And President Trump essentially says, I don't get it. What was in it for them? Essentially implying that being a volunteer soldier in the United States Army is a fool's errand. It's for suckers. Why the hell would anybody be stupid enough to do that? And he's saying that right next to the parent of a dead soldier.
Yeah, I mean, it's John Kelly who ended up being his chief of staff after he said this comment reportedly.
All John Kelly did, by the way, was, continue to work for Trump, continue to ascend within the administration.
Yeah. And be silent now. Like, he doesn't, he didn't even go on the record for this story after. It's just, it's crazy. Like, that's a level of cuckery
Gutlessness is craziness.
It's crazy. But, yeah, I mean, the reality is that Trump, in his 2-year-old brain, ham-fisted way, kind of comes up on something in which he's like, why would anyone volunteer for the army, right? Like, why would anyone volunteer for the army? And the reality is that people volunteer for the army for the most part these days out of a sense of economic incentive, really. Like, sure. it's a way out of poverty or like at least a perceived way out of poverty. Yep. Because tons of veterans come back, and there's suicide rates and homelessness and all that stuff that comes with it. But the people are, the underclass of this country, like the poor and working class people in this country, are so beaten down. They have so little prospect and hope for any meaningful kind of path out of poverty that the army starts to look pretty good. And that was part of the trade-off in a way. It's like, ever since America went to a full volunteer army sometime in the early 70s, before that it wasn't. They, that was one of the worries. But like, as kind of people's incomes went declining and the welfare state was gutted, all of a sudden the army starts to look pretty good. So Trump was kind of like putting his finger on something there.
Yes.
For John Kelly specifically, his son probably went because of insane daddy issues or something, because John Kelly, they didn't grow up poor, but he was probably trying to impress his dad. But yeah, I mean, but again, the discourse around this whole story is really mind-numbing, right? Because Jeffrey Goldberg, who's now the editor at Atlantic, is someone who should never have worked in journalism again after he published in March of 2002, that Saddam Hussein had links to Al-Qaeda and basically was involved in 9/11, which is 100% false, 100% debunked. This was in the New Yorker, which is the most prestigious liberal magazine in America, with the most rigorous fact-checking, supposedly. Jeffrey Goldberg published an article linking Saddam Hussein to Al-Qaeda, which was one of the key rationale for the war in Iraq. Yep. And Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, right? And again, it's just at the end of the day, it's just a gossip story. It's unlike the Woodward scoop, which is legitimate, policy, had legitimate policy ramifications. This is just kind of Trump is just a disgusting man story, not really kind of any actual. There's no real import to those comments beyond he disrespected the troops or something. It's vague. It doesn't have a real concrete policy thing. So yeah, I mean, it all gets kind of fed through the meat grinder of the culture war. And people kind of sort themselves out in the two camps. Either the libs are all now we should rename all the bases after John McCain because those were the real Republicans. Like Pete Buttigieg went on Fox News. It's like, you have to ask yourself, are you a John McCain Republican or Donald Trump Republican?
No, they hated John McCain. What are you talking
fucking hate John
about?
McCain, the guy who kept
all
on losing.
hated him.
Yeah, only liberals love John McCain.
The Republicans hated John McCain, dude. That's why he couldn't beat W for the nomination. That's why he went to the freaking dark side when he did the Palin stuff and all of that against Barack, because they hated him. Of course not. None of them they were never John McCain Republicans.
Nah.
They
were always Trump Republicans.
Exactly. That was never the case. And that's obvious. It's obvious. It's obvious because John McCain kept getting his ass kicked. Yeah. Until he started basically kowtowing to those same freaking Republicans, basically what republicanism stands for.
There was no popular base for John McCain.
Never. Or Mitt Romney. Never. Never. The guy had to freaking run against his own policies as a Republican. These people were they never loved Jeb Bush types. No.
Well, it's the flip side of what we say about Biden. Biden is essentially what are the differences between Joe Biden and John McCain? Nothing.
Nothing.
Literally nothing.
Nothing.
They probably agree on 99% of the issues.
Yeah.
But there's no popular mandate for those. For those type of people. No one's excited to vote for Joe Biden for the same reason that no Republican was excited to vote for John McCain, outside of defense contractors around Chevy Chase in Virginia, who love John McCain for vague kind of patriotism reasons. But
and guess what? And I'm glad you brought up the culture war, because it's this stupid, weird things that liberals are forced to do, and I don't know why. Why do we have to be military lovers now? We got to suck the dick of the military just because Trump did something unbecoming? We can hold two thoughts at the same time.
Defend the U.S. intervention in World War I, which was a mistake.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Eugene Debs, the leader of the Socialist Party, went to prison for opposing the war. Woodrow Wilson put him in jail because the Socialist Party at the time opposed the war, and Woodrow Wilson put the leader of the Socialist Party in jail for it. He still ran for president and still got millions of votes, but it was a mistake. It was a mistake. It was known at the time that this was a pointless, stupid imperialist war between aristocracies, and the regular people had nothing to do with it, nothing worth fighting for. Millions of people were sent to their slaughter for literally no reason. And
people to this day still can't even tell you what World War I is about. If somebody tries to explain it to you,
they murdered some dude in Serbia and some duke, and then all
the
of a sudden,
Russians and the Germans were like, "Hold on, we're involved now," and it's like, what?
Yeah, and then 15 million people are died in the trenches in the meat grinder of the machine gun. But and it's something that bothered me so much about that Wonder Woman movie that everyone loved with Gal Gadot, which is a terrible movie. But the whole thing was this World War I thing where the Germans were these evil people. They were basically made them look like Nazis, and it just wasn't true. The Germans were no worse or better than the French or the British or the Americans in that war. It was just it was all the same shit. World War II was a legit Titanic struggle between good and evil, blah blah blah. But World War I was not. So Trump saying asking why did we get into World War I? Who were the good guys in that war? And the liberals oh my God,
America was the good guys.
Yeah, of course America was the good guy. The Allies were the good guys. No, not really.
Not really. There were no good guys in that whole enterprise. It was just millions of people. And by the way, the beginning of modern warfare, even the people that ended up surviving that shit, this is the beginning of PTSD and all of that stuff. But whatever, liberals gonna lib. They're gonna be rock-headed about the stupidest things. Of course, it's important that we have a president who is just so mindless and gutless that he can't even help himself in just the most, just basic human decency, his carnal nature of just what's in it for me? He can't even restrain that even for a second. Obviously, that speaks to the man. Obviously, he can't be a civil servant, man. That dude can't serve anybody but himself. Yeah. And so, whatever. We move on from Trump is bad news to everybody's favorite Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. Of course, Politico puts out a story, and I love the headline, Nando. Purity tests. Democrats clash over Biden's diversity goals, and the gist of the story is that the black bourgeoisie of the Democratic Party are essentially telling Joe Biden, hey, man, don't go crazy listening to those sicko leftists within the party. We get that they're loud and unhinged and deranged. And of course, we know that Bernie Sanders, who represents that element of the party, obviously has a lot of fans and supporters, and you want to appease those people because you want to win in November. But shit, man, there's a lot of black people that worked at prominent financial institutions, worked at hedge funds, worked on Wall Street, that can get some of these cabinet positions. Don't go crazy using that as some marker. And Nando, the official defense of this is that some black people had to take these jobs because they're high paying and they had to feed their family. So it can't be a demerit. Like, I'm sorry. You're financially secure now. You don't need, so like definitionally, that means you don't need these government jobs. Like, you've made a shit ton of money in the financial sector. Like, just definitionally, we know you don't need this freaking job. And so just the idea that, oh, it shouldn't be used as a demerit because I don't come from a family with money, so I had to go out. That's cool. You made money. You work in those institutions. That doesn't mean that somebody who is appointed by the people of this country should have folks like you appointed to run important things that affect their lives, just so more cronyism can happen. Just because black people get into those positions doesn't mean that it won't be crony capitalism again. Like, I don't want, like, the argument is just an incoherent one. And also it's like this idea that you just can't find qualified black people who don't come from those institutions. And those, like, and we talk about, it's important why we talk about these institutions, right? Like working on K Street, working at Goldman Sachs, going to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, all of those institutions, those are all little clubs within themselves. And the Dems love those fucking clubs. They just do, bruh. And so, like, this idea is like, hold on, man, we're not gonna turn off the spigot now. We got black people in those clubs. We, like, it's like, this is the Dems' idea of diversity and inclusion. It's don't address the conditions that produce these outcomes, which is don't address the fact that Wall Street y'all been taking cues from Wall Street and the financial services industries for decades. And the current climate and culture of our country is what these are the outcomes that produced. Like, we did this already. This is what you guys have produced for us. Why would we keep doing the same thing? So you're just telling me putting black faces on that same process is going to make the lives of black people in the hood better? Like, how could that possibly be the argument?
Well, that's why the left criticizes identity politics. I mean, this is one of the most crystal clear examples of the limits of identity politics and representation for representation's sake.
Yes.
You know, if you don't do anything to change the power structures, representation is essentially meaningless. You know, I mean, the classic example is that we had a black president, Barack Obama, and in his time as president, black wealth collapsed. You know, it did nothing to help actual black people. You know, like it doesn't mean that his example and stuff isn't inspirational on some level, on some symbolic level, but in material terms, black wealth collapsed under the Obama presidency. And this is just what, you know, how that kind of often well-meaning push for diversity can get twisted for cynical aims to basically reinforce the power structure, which is you know, the old joke is the future is a drone panel in which there's a trans person and a gay person and a black person and an Asian person, and they're talking about drone warfare, and it's sponsored by Raytheon, you know? No, I mean, it doesn't matter that those people are diverse. The problem is drone bombing, so this is just like the latest example in how the Democratic Party specifically has understood identity politics as a very, very effective weapon against the left, right? Against any meaningful transformation of the economic structures in America. They use things like Bernie running against Hillary Clinton is sexist, and it's like, and then Hillary Clinton says that, like, well, breaking up the banks solve racism. No, it's like, what does that even mean? The breaking up the banks would do a lot to help people's lives. But then racism, I don't know. I mean, maybe like some white guy will still call you the N-word, Wos, but like, if the predations of Wall Street are not like ruining your life, I think you could probably live with that. You could
probably live with it. The trade-off there is quite easy to understand, too.
Right. Yeah. So this is just what that is. I mean, this is just such a crystal clear example of it. And the woman who's been pushing this is a woman by the name of Nicole Venable. Okay. And Nicole Venable, she's black. She is a lobbyist. Like, she is a straight up K Street lobbyist for things like FedEx, CVS Health, Navient Corp, which is like a student loan, predatory lender, like all manner of just awful industries. But she's understood, like, she got a seat at the table, as a member of the black bourgeoisie, as you called it, and what they try to do is kind of put like this progressive sheen on the status quo. It's like, look, we have the black CEO of this like awful company.
But the problem is, though, Nando, like, it does make a certain type of black person feel better to see it. Like, I know it just from my experience in life, right?
I'm sure.
When you are a black yuppie, as I am, and you tend to only hang around black yuppies, like, I'm telling you, they do Queen Kamala Harris's VP nomination. Like, they're like, this is great. This is another upwardly mobile black person being upwardly mobile, right? Like, it does warm the heart of a certain type of black person, but it's a minority of black people. It just straight up is. Yeah. And but
they're the ones with cultural influence.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just don't understand how having a black Treasury Secretary who worked at Goldman Sachs is going to make a difference. All I see when I see black Democrats talk about, hey, man, these purity tests are going to fuck up diversity. All I see is them saying, we have people who we already like, who happen to be black. Let's throw them in, right? Yeah. And I want to, there's a quote in the Political Story from Jeff Hauser of the Revolving Door Project, right? And he says, quote, to say that we would have to have people who are currently working in private equity or Wall Street or the banking industry to take up senior economic jobs is absurd. You can come up with a few very rich set of potential appointees of color without taking on people who are currently and very recently closely identified with high finance. Like, this is not rocket science, y'all. This is not rocket science. Like, you cannot get the people from those same institutions to come in and do things that are contrary to the goals of those institutions, which is just complete and utter avarice. That's it. Yeah. It's just about making as much money as you possibly can. They have no freaking principles, goals. They're not invested in what happens to communities of color as far as poor people.
They can say the words. They can say the words that like assuage white liberal guilt. Yes. On those fronts, what was that hilarious policy that Kamala was promoting, like Pell Grants for people who started businesses, Pell Grant relief for
it's like you had to do it within the next 3 years. It was just like, what?
Maybe the black Secretary of Treasury could come up with the next policy like that.
If you open a juice bar in Compton, it's just like, what the hell are you even talking about, bro? And how many people? It's just, this neoliberal version of diversity and inclusion. It's like we always say, and again, it's not to beat a dead horse, but it's to just show you examples of this stuff in practice, right? It's like, no, make sure you get some fancy Negroes in there. Period.
Yeah.
Period. Because the type of Negro who gets in there matters to them. And it matters to us too.
Yeah.
And it matters to us that is not a fancy, like for us, we don't want fancy Negroes.
No.
We don't want bourgeoisie Negroes. They're a part of the power structure. We don't want that. We want the Jamal Bowman types. Like we want people who actually have some type of connection. Bush. You know, Corey Bush, like some type of connection to normal, everyday people.
Yeah, the guy who went to Harvard, like, is indistinguishable from, like, you know, Walter Price, you know, whatever, like blonde hair, khaki wearing, Harvard douchebag. Yeah.
And sorry, you know, the further we get away from the campaign and the presidency, yes, Barry is one of those Harvard douchebags, y'all. And anyway, you know, something else that came up, where was that? Oh, Washington Post put out a story about essentially, you know, a progressive panel was made in conjunction with the Biden campaign to come up with some policy planks. Essentially the banking community said that they talked to Joe Biden and all of those things were just suggestions and he's going to throw it out the window. Washington Post.
As soon as he gets in there.
Yeah, as soon as he gets in there. And the Washington Post described it as Biden having, quote, flexibility on policy, Nando. What do you think about that euphemism there? Flexibility.
That's amazing. Yeah, he's flexible. He's flexible. It only bends in one direction. It only bends in one direction. Yeah. Flexible all the way to the right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this was when Bernie Sanders lost to Joe Biden in the primary, the basic concession that he got for essentially playing ball and supporting Joe Biden and campaigning for him and all that stuff is these unity task forces in which they were going to like bring members of the Bernie campaign and members of the Biden campaign, and they were going to come up with policy proposals together. And of course, like, you know, Bernie's campaign did their best to like include things like whatever, you know, like meaningful climate legislation, something to rein in Wall Street and blah, blah, blah. And obviously there's nothing binding Joe Biden to any of these policies. He can walk away from them whenever he wants, you know, and but that's what, in theory, Bernie got as a concession. And even that small symbolic concession was a bridge too far for
the
Wall
money
Street.
Class. Yep.
Yeah, the money class, essentially. And they've been calling the Biden campaign. They're like, are you guys fucking serious about this shit? Like, you guys are really going to consider doing any of this shit? And they're like, no, we're not. We're not at all. Not at all. This is just some bullshit that we do to like keep those fucking crazies on the left, you know, appeased. But like, we don't plan on doing any of this shit. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. You know, it's depressing. I mean, I suspect Bernie's no fool, you know, because Bernie's been around the block and he knows how power works. And I don't think he was naive to think that any of this would have the meaningful kind of policy effect that he would like. But I mean, I think Bernie's caught like in an impossible position. It's like, well, what is he going to do? Not campaign for Joe Biden and like let Donald Trump win re-election? I understand Bernie's impulse to like do whatever he can to get Trump out, like as a first step, and then, you know, and then see what you can do after that. But like the conditions, I think, have shown under Trump that it's difficult for the left to meaningfully have the conversations that it wants to have about the economy when Trump is saying things like, you know, Hitler not such a bad guy. Yeah, maybe he had a point when he did all the bad things, you know, like, and then everyone has to like talk about that for a week. You know what I mean? Instead of like talking about there's something like the $1 trillion CARES Act, in which we just gave corporations and the investor class trillions of dollars while we left everyone else out to dry. So I think that's Bernie's calculus. But yeah, this just shows like everyone who, you know, all these kind of like people on the left that were like, look, we got all these like policies in the task force thing. It's like, that was just naivete. Like they're not going to do any of that shit unless they're forced to in some meaningful way. And because of our stupid two-party system, like, what are we going to do? Like tank a Biden presidency to allow Trump to win re-election. It's an impossible choice, right? It's an impossible choice. So, Bernie's made the calculation that I think most people on the left have done. That's like, you just got to get Trump out and then live to fight another day and figure it out from there. But yeah.
All right. Well, and finally this week, my dreams and hopes of a Lionel Messi and Man City, blue. Yes, in the blue of Manchester City have been dashed, at least temporarily. Essentially, Barcelona dug in their heels. They said that, you had a date to do this. You missed your deadline. If you want to go, Man City's going to have to essentially give us $750 million with a B, y'all, dollars for your services. And so I think the can has been kicked down the road. Messi essentially said he's coming back because he has to. He wasn't going to take Barcelona to court. He doesn't have that level of ill feelings towards them. Basically, the head CEO of the team remains in place, but it seems like if you read the tea leaves, when you saw 1 year, you saw the interview that he gave.
Yeah,
Messi notoriously does not talk.
No, he doesn't.
He notoriously does not talk, and he basically did the Messi version of unloading on Barcelona. Yeah. And basically, he's coming back under duress. He's gonna play out the season. Nando, please give the people, some additional analysis of Lionel Messi staying.
One thing that's confusing about all this,
Barcelona,
to the average American sports fan, is that Barcelona, like Real Madrid and like two other clubs in Spain, are actually run democratically. The fans vote for the president of the club.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, imagine you got to vote Wos for the GM of the Knicks.
Oh my goodness. Or the owner of the fucking Mets. Yeah, you got to
vote out John Dolan and
Jesus Christ,
or whatever his name is,
and the Wilpons.
Yeah.
Crooks
so,
they are.
But that's how it works in Barcelona. This guy has one more year left on his term. So he's happy, like the president of Barcelona is happy. He's like, I'm not going to be the guy who let Messi go.
Messi, right.
So he lives to fight another day. I mean, basically what he had to do is hold out strong and just kind of be quiet and let the lawyers kind of look at the contract. And I think, Messi has negotiated a clause in his contract that allows him to leave at the end of the season, but he has a very brief window to exercise it, And in this case, because there was some confusion because of the pandemic, extended the season, but it didn't extend the sort of contract dates, that were originally stipulated. And Messi missed his window to exercise the I get out of jail free card, and he tried to argue that maybe because the end of the season was pushed back, that the contract clause will automatically be pushed back, and Barcelona was like, no way. And I'm guessing Messi's lawyers looked at it and they're like, well, we could fight this in court, we could hash it out in court, or but it doesn't look great, So yeah, Messi, Barca's not going to sell him. That was one thing people were like, oh, well, maybe Barca just takes 100 million euros for him.
That's what I was thinking too. Maybe this was a negotiation tactic of, obviously the 775 million was the initial offer.
That's his release clause, which is in soccer in Spain, actually, just in Spain, all players have something called a release clause. There's a fee attached to them that if someone pays it, they can walk. No negotiation. That's how Neymar left Barcelona. Barca did not want to sell Neymar, but they didn't have a choice. PSG paid the clause, Neymar agreed to it, and that's it. Barca can't do anything about it.
Right.
So Messi's release clause is 700 million euros or whatever, something insane. No Barcelona president was ever going to negotiate for the sale of Messi. They'd rather go down, you know what I mean? They'll go to
just
the
let him
figurehead.
walk, and then it will be he left of his own volition.
Right.
We had no hands.
Yeah, we can't do anything about it.
The team. Yeah, right,
exactly.
Right, got you.
But anyone who collaborates with the sale of Messi would have riots on the streets in front of their house forever. They'll always be known as that guy who sold Messi. I don't know.
Got you.
So yeah, it was never going to happen. In that way. I mean, I thought that Messi was going to take this issue of the release of the contract release a little bit further. But yeah, like you said, that interview was crazy. He's playing under duress. It feels like he's just going to be there for the year, and then as soon as he can, exercise the clause to get out of his contract at the end of the season. Although you never know, like things can change in a year. It's very conceivable that Barca turns it around next season and wins the league, for example. Right. And then in that case, maybe like, maybe I'll stay. You know what I mean? But yeah, Barca lives to fight another day with Messi. Wos does not get Messi at Man City. It's very sad.
And also, it upsets me because I know for a fact, the next go around, now that everybody knows that he's looking to do something, there are going to be more people involved in a potential Messi recruitment. Although we know there's only a few serious people. I'm sure PSG could probably put together a nice little offer for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, of course, we know Man City with that oil money, they're not going to fuck around. But I think, there will just be more teams in the running the next go around, which distresses me as a City fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. Barcelona, like Nando said, lives to fight another day. That's our show for today. Make sure you become a patron of Count the Dings. That's patreon.com/Count the Dings. Listen to Let's Pod It Out, Nando's outstanding Entourage Recap Pod. Make sure you subscribe to the Mailbag and Cinephobe and all the other offerings on countthedings.com. We'll see you guys next week. For Nando Vila, I'm Big Wos. We're out of here.